Alright, comrades, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Beholder 2. So, to get all the endings, I thought I could just go and get the Heimdall codes that I didn't acquire. Like, go and find the biometric safes, find all of them, and I'll be able to have all the endings. It wasn't that easy. I missed some that are no longer accessible, and that's my bad. Then I had to replay the entire game. So I replayed the entire game to get the endings, and I figured while I was doing that I would just record the locations. So that's how you guys got the locations video. And then I was like, okay, I'll record all endings. And then I apparently didn't even realize that to add an administrator you can't kill off your bosses, and I don't know why. I didn't realize that. So I killed them all off so that I would be able to have enough authority to move up in the world, and that was a big mistake because that was half the endings. So instead of playing the game for a third time, full playthrough, I just found somebody else's save and I just did that way. I'm gonna be honest. I found someone else's save, I loaded into it, and that's how I have the administrators now. I wish that I knew that from the get-go, but I was not going to play this game for a third time because I might actually lose my mind. Because while it's really grueling to play it 3 weeks in a row from start to finish, I couldn't do it, guys. So yeah, I wish I had realized that I could just get a save off the internet and not have to replay the entire game to get the codes, but here we are. So yes, this is the all endings video. Now before we get started, I originally only had 175 Heimdall codes to choose from, and so because of that, in my playthrough, I would have chosen Isolate Heimdall, which is basically Evan just committing suicide. I've seen all the endings now, obviously, because I've recorded them. So I would want to choose, if I could choose and had all the Heimdall codes, I would have chosen you've got to jump off cliffs, you've got to jump off cliffs all the time and build your wings on the way down. That is like the true ending, I believe, and that's the one that I would have done. The worst ending, in my opinion, is DeSalvo's. I mean, they're all kind of bad, but that one is like, you get tortured at the end, or Evan does. So I'm just like, So if I had to choose out of the ones that I did receive the last time, I would have done Isolate Heimdall. And then my complaint, not even a complaint, it's just, okay, your dad is, a high ministry person, right? And you were like, they're gonna like do bad things with these codes. I need to I need to jump off a cliff to destroy myself so that the only person who could possibly get these codes is my son, right? Why wouldn't he make you've got to jump off cliffs all the time and build your wings on the way down? Zero Heimdall codes. Why not? No, instead you have to find all of them. So unless you find all of the diary pages, all the biometric safes, and all that kind of stuff, you're never going to get a good ending. You see my complaint? Why wouldn't he make that 0 and make everything else, like if you wanted to really get DeSalvo his torturous world, why wouldn't you make that 250 points? Like, make him descending. Why would you make the good one bad? Like, as a father thinking, oh, what if my son never finds any more Heimdall codes? I would just make it like 50 or 0, not 250, or your whole entire life is going to be shot down the drain, right? You guys agree? Okay, rant over. I am sorry. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I worked really hard on it, and I will talk to your faces later. Bye!
A series of terrible explosions shook the city. The relay towers became colossal columns of flame, falling on residents' houses and destroying the streets below. Violent fires raged for several days, and when they were finally put out, the heaps of twisted iron and sad memories were all that remained of Project Heimdall. Little changed in the country. Ministers continued to fight over power. Old players were deposed by new ones, each more vain than the last. Ordinary citizens remained a bargaining chip in political games, small cogs in the soulless machine of total. The ruling elite had no use for Evan. After the protective dome disappeared, he was held at gunpoint and thrown out the same window his father had fallen from. Like father, like son, they shouted at him in a mocking farewell. And only during that fall, in a state of absolute terror, did Evan truly feel free for the first time in his life, even if only for a fraction of a second. Over time, the huge relay towers became a familiar part of the urban landscape. Slowly turning rusty and useless, they hung gloomily over the heads of everyone below. And though some said that the towers were only slumbering, still waiting for their master, no one ever found out what they were really built for. Little changed in the country. Ministers continued to fight over power. Old players were deposed by new ones, each more vain than the last. Ordinary citizens remained a bargaining chip in political games, small cogs in the soulless machine of total surveillance and control. Evan's sacrifice wasn't in vain. None of the ministers who so passionately wanted unlimited control over the minds of the citizens were able to have it. Who knows how much worse things could have been if Heimdall had fallen into the wrong hands. But in the final seconds of his life, Evan still thought, could things have turned out differently? Was there ever any A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. Luxury, senseless and merciless. Marble statues, palaces of golden toilets for officials, Persian carpets, mountains of jewels and money, full pools filled with champagne. The atmosphere of greed and a rotten system drowning in corruption. People stopped seeing anything wrong in it. The worship of one idol over another caused no kind of conflict. The signal from the relays took care of that. The wise leader was replaced by the luxurious leader, and no one noticed. Ferguson didn't appreciate the gesture. Of course, he gladly took control of the relays, but that didn't change anything for Evan. The boss didn't trust Redgrave. so he got rid of him as soon as he had what he wanted. Evan was accused of conspiring to overthrow the regime and arrested on the spot. The overzealous police officers, already under the influence of Heimdall's signals, beat Evan mercilessly, screaming, "This is for Ferguson." He was a low pulsating hum drawn through the city, filling the air, boring into... In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. It's scary when a real psychopath comes to power, and it is a nightmare if his power is limitless. But there are no words to describe the horror when this maniac gains control of your mind. In the hands of the Salvo, Heimdall towers spread across the country, but they didn't just force people to obey. From time to time, they transmitted a single emotion at full capacity: pure horror. Beside themselves with fear, people would increasingly hole up in the deepest crevices they could find, like mice. They had less and less time for anything useful. An atmosphere of impending doom, bordering on panic, reigned in the country for a long time. Evan plunged into a world of boundless overindulgence. At first to satisfy his own curiosity, and then for the sake of entertainment, he brought an incredible amount of pain into this world. The apprentice surpassed his master. People started to fear him even more than they feared the Salvo, and as soon as the new leader realized this, Evan's career ended very quickly, unlike his life. He would have been happy to die, but he no longer had the luxury of making his own choices. A low pulsating hum drawn through the city, filling the air. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. The relays quickly spread across the country, and citizens were processed into biomaterial to create clones. Copies of the ideal employee, once known as Carl Stein, replaced ordinary people, first in Helmer, then throughout the country, and then, step by step, all over the world. And next, the conquest of the solar system and the stars. A perfect, effectively functioning world has no room for strife or war, hunger or injustice, love or compassion. When the work was done and everyone, even his family, had been erased from his life, Evan shared the same fate as his boss. They passed away as equals, proudly looking at the fruits of their labor and leaving behind an ideal society that worshipped their images, preserved their Bible, and forever remembered Evan as a prophet beside the divine Isaac Weinberg. Death did not frighten Redgrave, because he had accepted it on his own free will, unlike the millions of people he had deprived of the choice.
kommen leverans med gamana. Levani papper med.
A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required. Heimnitz deceived Evan unshamedly. With the relays at his disposal, he spread them quickly throughout the country and immediately carried out his plan to destroy the population. People dutifully lined up at the euthanasia centers, and when there was no one left, the Boreans came and took everything they needed. The once great country became a desert with the frightening, empty streets of a ghost town. Evan wasn't able to see it through to the end. He was only able to marvel at how quickly his fate had been decided, and regretted that Heimnitz didn't find enough soap for his rope. At least he wasn't around to witness one of the largest genocides in history, and the destruction of his family along with it.
Levani papper med. Le ragazzine hanno sempre
In vita ma di che ruole?
leverans med gamana. Levani papper med. Levani kommen
A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. The desire of an abstract common good embedded into the minds of citizens had unexpected consequences. As it turns out, everyone has their own idea of good, and this meant that people strived for different, often opposite things. A wave of unmotivated violence swept through the city. People attacked one another at random, sincerely believing that they were doing it for the common good. When the wave of violence subsided, leaving behind it blood-soaked streets, the few survivors, shaking to the depth of their souls by the incident, started building a better world. And they did it with such fervor that they forgot about their own basic needs. After only a month, Helmer was a ghost town where even the most desperate did not set foot. Anyone who understood what was happening and who still had free will wisely fled the city, while Evan stayed on the top floor, witnessing the consequences of his choice day after day. Sometimes in moments of weakness, he thought that punishing himself with the monstrous sight of the massacre below was enough to atone for his sins, but soon there was no one left to whom he could repent. And so the thought of the shredder several floors below seemed more and more attractive to Evan every day. But what mattered was that the thought was his own. A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. Is a cult of personality really such a bad thing? After all, if someone receives praise to the high heavens, doesn't that mean that they deserve it? The mindless worship of the wise leader was replaced by the blind adoration of Evan Redgrave. And if citizens had previously been able to afford to express their disapproval of the current state of affairs even in a whisper, now no one would have dared to do so, because having one's own thoughts is an unaffordable luxury in a country covered with relay towers. But this is not the end, it is only the beginning. There are still so many places in the world where Heimdall towers are yet to rise into the skies, and so many countries yet to learn about Evan Redgrave. Replacing the wise leader, is that not the pinnacle of a ministry career? The name Redgrave was respected before, but now it inspires awe. Isn't that what you wanted for your son, Father? Isn't that the greatness you dreamed of when you created Heimdall? Evan sits at the top of the world, and everything belongs to him, from the mountains and rivers to the people and their thoughts. He alone decides what his subjects can feel and want. Evan Redgrave is a god now, and what does it matter that the fate of all gods is loneliness?
I ragazzi ne hanno sempre le medesime comune. Le vari mappe per dormire i ragazzi ne hanno sempre le vari come se. Le medesime comune.
A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. You can't force a person to be happy against their will. But what if you forcefully give them free will? What if you instill in them a single thought? From now on, you make your own decisions and take responsibility for your own actions. Could it bring about peace? The inhabitants of Helmer were the first to become truly independent. Even though their lives weren't perfect, their choices were often far from ideal, and the consequences of these choices were painful. But they had their own choices, their own happiness, and their own mercy. The ministers, all of them were executed. The monstrous and useless bureaucratic apparatus was gradually dismantled, and the ministry building was turned into a museum dedicated to senseless cruelty. Evan became a full-fledged member of the new society. When asked about what happened in the last days of the great state, he would only smile and stay silent. He had no wish to recall his time spent in the ministry or the nightmares that he witnessed and took part in. Evan lost himself in real work and finally reunited with his family. Until the very end of his life, he tried to erase from his memory the faces of his superiors and colleagues, wishing fervently that he could stop hearing military marches in the distance and the roar of 1,000 voices chanting, "All hail the wise leader."